All right, hello everyone. I'm Mike Wasilko. I'm the Natural Resources Supervisor here in Region 8. Thank you for joining us for this annual waterfowl season preview and update on habitat conditions. We're going to start off with an update on waterfowl programs at the statewide level, followed by updates on current conditions at the wildlife management areas and federal refuges here in Region 8. After the presentations, we'll have some time to answer questions that people have entered in the question and answer section. And for the statewide program update, I'll turn it over to Josh Stiller.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this beautiful, I guess we'll call it a fall day, even though it was almost 80 degrees today. Share my screen here and we'll get going. All right, could someone just let me know that we're good and you all can see my screen? Anybody, any of the panelists, just give me a...
It looks good, Josh.
All right, thanks. Just wanted to make sure. All right, so my name is Josh Stiller. I'm our small game unit leader, so I oversee our programs from fur bearers to waterfowl and upland game birds. And I'm going to give you an idea of kind of things that are going around in the flyway, both like waterfowl population levels, some of the research that we're doing, and then I'll touch on season setting, but I won't spend a ton of time on that because we've spent a bunch of time on it in previous presentations. So why we have the harvest information program. So as you guys know, you have to register when you get your hunting license. If you want to hunt migratory game birds, you need to register for HIP every year, and every state has a separate HIP registration. That's because it's how we actually estimate the number of hunters, harvest, and the effort that goes in from hunters is all done through a federal survey. And so each state collects this information, and then we're able to survey hunters and be able to better understand how many ducks get shot, what species are getting shot. So we kind of have a twofold approach. So you might have seen a number of these surveys have gone to online only surveys. So it's really important when you register for HIP or when you purchase your license that you're giving us a legitimate email. That's especially true with e-licensing, obviously, because it's going to go straight to you. So if you want to get these surveys, that's how you're going to do it, because that's where we pull our samples from. So, I mean, I hear from a lot of people who say, you know, I've never been surveyed by you guys. Why is that? And oftentimes when we look into it with them and talk to them about it, it turns out that they didn't have a valid email address in our licensing system. So just make sure that you update that. It's also when we do, you know, our small game hunter survey to estimate how many small game hunters we have, it comes from this email address, this qemailserver.com. If you ever get an email from us and you don't know if it's legitimate or if it's some type of spam email, always feel free to give us a call or email us at our wildlife@dec.ny.gov. And we're happy to let you know. We try to let folks know too through our newsletter sometimes, just so folks aren't caught off guard. Why am I getting this email? So really important. It's how we do all of our surveys. It's how we get input on duck season dates and goose season stuff. So this is all, if you want to be engaged and be able to provide us kind of your opinions on what's going on, those are the ways you do it. So next we'll just touch on significant change to the electronic duck stamp. So a lot of folks probably know that we have had an electronic duck stamp for a while now, but new for this year and some of the big changes are that you can buy it directly from the Fish and Wildlife Service, this duckstamp.com site, and that one's actually valid for hunting. In the past, that one has not been valid for hunting, and you had to buy it through one of the state licensing systems. But starting this July, you can actually buy it right online. And the nice thing about it is that you're immediately licensed and ready as far as the duck stamp is concerned. Obviously, you still need a state hunting license and meet all the other obligations like HIP registration. But your e-stamp, as soon as you buy it, it's ready to go, and it's not state specific. You can use it anywhere. But the paper receipt or a digital copy must be carried at all times, and it must be basically to you as an individual. So, you know, obviously you can't share it or anything like that. You need individual stamp. and your information is attached to that digital duck stamp. The difference now is that in the past, that was only valid for 45 days, and they had to mail you the stamp, and then you had to carry a physical stamp with you after that. Now it's actually valid throughout the entire hunting season, and you won't get the physical stamp until after March 10th. So really nice. A lot of folks I know, especially in more rural areas, struggle to find a duck stamp. You know, the post office runs out, and then you got to go to 5 other ones just to find a stamp. And you know, if you remember at 9 o'clock at night, or your buddy remembers at 9 o'clock at night they don't have one, now we have a digital way to get that without having to miss a hunt. So that's a really nice improvement. Waterfowl ID courses, as folks know, there's a number of refuges and some state lands or state parks that require it. If you are looking for a course, I apologize if you guys are hearing my dog barking really loudly, but there are a number of courses that get taught this time of year. Not as many as our regular hunting courses or our bow hunting course. We've been trying to do more of our electronic courses through WebEx. So we offered one for 100 people this year. So just if you want to find these courses, they're right on our website. That QR code, if you take a screenshot of that, will take you right to the website where you can see upcoming events near you. All right, so that's kind of on the licensing front, some of the changes that have happened for this year. And I just wanted to give you an idea again of all the great work that our biologists around the state do every year to help us manage waterfowl. We banned an incredible number of birds, somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000. It depends on the year, it kind of varies. You can see last year we banned a lot of mallards, a lot of wood ducks, a lot of geese. And so this is our primary data source for a lot of our harvest decisions and how we set season lengths and bag limits and things like that. So it's really important that when folks harvest a bird with a band, make sure you're reporting it. It's online only is the only way to report now at www.reportband.gov. But yeah, so some great work around the state to mark all these birds and help us better understand population dynamics in waterfowl. So some of the big changes, as many of you have likely noticed by now, the bag limit for pintails has increased to 3 per day in the Atlantic Flyway, and actually continent-wide, well, US-wide. The regular season for Canada geese in upstate New York zone, so like all of them except for the southern zone where it's 5, went from or are now 1, and they're kind of going to remain at 1, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that is. So northern pintails, this is really a big change. This is something that the flyways have been working on for about 8 years or more probably to get us to this point. So some of the main objectives, you know, we're not trying to get back to 10 million pintails. We know that that's not an appropriate goal, but we're trying to ensure a long-term sustainable pintail population. We want to balance that long-term conservation and hunting opportunities, and to keep hunting seasons open as long as the pintail population is 1.2 million birds. So basically, once it gets below 1.2 million, we would be closing. But when it's above that, you know, we're willing to, you know, ducks are very resilient. They reproduce at a high rate. So we're willing to have more liberal bags because we don't believe, based on the information we have, that hunting is really driving that decline in pintails. So the goal of this program was also to allow a 3-bird bag limit. That's really important to some of the other flyways, like the Pacific Flyway, where pintails are a significant portion of their bag. And then in the Atlantic Flyway here, we wanted to avoid the going from closed to hybrid seasons to 1-bird bag limits, 2-bird bag limits with pintails. And we've seen all over the place kind of the pintail limit jump. And it really didn't make sense for the Atlantic Flyway, where pintails are a very small portion of our harvest. So that annual variability in bag limits, just one more thing for hunters to have to worry about. So whenever we can try to simplify, we do our best to do that. So why in the Atlantic Flyway is it a fixed pintail bag limit of 3? So no matter what, if the pintail season is open, in the other 3 flyways, it will be 3, even though their bag limits in other flyways may be 2 or 1, depending on the population status. That's because we harvest just 3% of the national pintail harvest. So the Atlantic flyway is just a drop in the bucket compared to the other flyways. Increased bag limits are going to have minimal impacts on our harvest and continental populations because, you know, rarely, except for in a few select places like Montezuma, some of the areas around there, Iroquois and Tonawanda, those places, you know, we don't have a huge number of pintails that are in New York State and in other Atlantic flyway states. And like I said, simplifying regulations is an important consideration for us. So the only time we're going to close on pintail is if it's closed nationally. Then you will see it close in the Atlantic flyway. So that's pintails. The next thing we move on to are Canada geese. And this is one that I think we'll still be talking about this in 30 years because it's one of those things. It's really hard to explain the nuance of Canada goose management. Because the reality is, although a goose is a goose, it's not really a goose when it comes to Canada geese because the birds in northern Quebec, so let me just try to pull up a pointer here. The birds that nest up here are very different than the birds that are nesting in our neighborhoods and in places in New York and southern Ontario. They take longer to sexually mature. They have fewer eggs in their clutch. Their goslings don't survive as well in that first year. They're very boom and bust, whereas the birds down the street are going to nest and be successful almost every single time. Birds in northern Canada are not. They have a lot more pressures from weather. Their nesting season is super short, and if ice hangs out, like, I mean, these birds are nesting around ice in June in some years, and that ice even extends into late June some years. And when that happens, we have almost complete busts in productivity, which eventually catch up to population. So they're very different, and you can see that in their population trends. So our resident Canada geese have just been on this constant upward tick and have been, I mean, they've been somewhat stable for a while, but at this really high level. But as you can see, we actually have as many breeding pairs in New York as we're talking about for that entire migratory population. So that's why you see these very big swings in how many geese you can shoot and how those bag limits are always changing in some zones, but not in others. And so you can see over here, you know, we're talking about 150,000 pairs or around 300,000 geese. And the concerning part is you can see for a long time from about 2003 or so until 2017, we were sitting pretty. It was pretty stable. We had gotten out of those years where we had closed seasons, which we never want to get back to. Closed seasons is always obviously the worst possible outcome. And now we're getting into this kind of period of lower goose populations. And you saw this 3-year decline, which was definitely a concern. So that question of why can I shoot one on this side of the street, but I go to the other side of the street and I can shoot 5, that makes no sense. Well, this is why it does make sense. So those zones aren't drawn, although they look arbitrary, are not arbitrary at all. They are based on data. And so all these blue dots on this map here, and green and red, those are Canada goose recoveries from those subarctic birds on the Ungava Peninsula that I was just talking about, called Atlantic population geese. And you can see, yes, we have a few stragglers that get shot in non-AP zones, but you can see where the clusters of where the majority of these geese are shot. And you can see that on the left is just New York. This is the entire Atlantic flyway. The reality is these birds winter down here in the Delmarva Peninsula and the eastern shore of Maryland. And that's where the majority of them get shot. But New York is a significant contributor to the harvest of Atlantic population. So we harvest a meaningful number of these geese. So banding data is one way we get data. Banding data only tells us where they are and where they get shot. The other type of information we'll be getting for a number of years now is from collars. So we put these collars with GPS located. They give us a location every 10 minutes on where that goose is. And we can get nice maps like this and look at where are our zones that allow for AP goose harvest. and where are those birds in relation to that? And you can see, just like that banding data, those hunter recoveries really reflect where AP geese are in New York State by and large. There's very few hotspots that aren't within those core zones. So that's really encouraging that our zones are correctly set up to protect these migratory geese that we know are really susceptible to overharvest. So really neat stuff. We're going to be doing a lot of other research with this Canada goose data, looking at, where we're surveying for geese to make sure that nothing is changing, like range shift could obviously affect our population estimates. We can look at productivity from those collars. We can actually tell whether or not the bird successfully nested or not without ever going up there. So ton of great data we're going to be able to incorporate into our future decision making from those 600 birds that have collars on them. So again, this is that northern part of Ungava Peninsula. These are the transects that we fly, or the Canadian Wildlife Service and Fish and Wildlife Service fly every year. The core breeding areas are along the Hudson Bay and along the Ungava Bay, and a lot lower densities here in the middle. You can see where we're seeing that decline, though, is on this Hudson Bay. So that's a concern, because that's always been our stronghold, where it's a pretty big area and it had really high numbers of breeding geese. And you can see it's starting to drop off. So it's this dark black line with the squares. So how do we make a decision every year? So we actually have a model that predicts what the population is going to be next year based on all the data for the last 30 years. So it builds in productivity. Because these geese take 3 to 5 years to sexually mature, we kind of know what's coming, because this breeding season is not as influential on next year's breeding population as the breeding or the productivity from 3 years ago. So we can build in all that information and kind of predict what's going to happen with the breeding population the following year. So for the 25-26 hunting season, so this current hunting season, we had to make a decision last fall to set the season length. And this is kind of the layout. We have 4 options. Closed, if there's less than 60,000. If there's 60,000 to 125, it's a restrictive season. 125 to 160 is moderate, and 160 or more is when we would go to liberal. Last year, we were presented with an estimate of 133,000 breeding pairs is what the model was predicting. That was significantly more than what were counted when they went up there. And so we were in this situation where, although the model is telling us that you have this increase here, our last 3 surveys were all in a declining trend. We had 2 years with no data because of COVID. If we had these 2 years of data, we would have probably felt a lot more comfortable making a decision, because that's really what's dictating depops over breeding populations over here, if they had good productivity. So we had to make an informed estimate of what productivity was in those years when we weren't up there. So age ratios last year were the second lowest in the past 20 years, and that declining trend. So for those 2 reasons, this hunting season right now stayed with a 30-1, and that was just out of an abundance of caution. We don't want to get to close seasons. We want to make sure that this population gets back into the 160 plus, which it was for a long time. And so this was our way of trying to give those geese one more year to recover, to make sure we're at least in that moderate package, and hopefully for a while, so we're not bouncing around as much. So what happened this year? So we meet in the fall is actually when the flyways meet and make recommendations to the Fish and Wildlife Service on what the season should be in future years. And the data that we have, our count data came in really high, higher than we would have expected, at over 150,000 birds. And then the model is predicting for next year we'll be at about 163,000. So that's good news. We're seeing increases. The problem is this year we had really poor productivity again. However, what we ended up doing this time around is because we were restrictive last year, when we maybe didn't have to be. We decided to go with what the model was predicting, and we are going to jump next year, so for 2026-27, to a 45-day season with a 3-bird bag limit in New York. In the Delmarva, they'll have a 2-bird bag limit. So just wanted to give you guys an idea of kind of how we make those decisions, all the things that we're considering when we make those recommendations. None of this is final until it's approved by the Service Regulatory Committee, which happens in a couple of weeks. But that is where we are likely going for goose seasons next year. All right, so that's kind of season setting. All the other species were pretty much in line with where we have been. There aren't any major changes. There's no other changes to bag limits in the Atlantic flyway that I can think of off the top of my head. But next, we'll give you an update on at least one of our research projects. We have a number of research projects that are getting close to wrapping up right now. But our largest one is our Eastern Mallard Research project. In the flyway, we've marked over 2,500 female mallards over the last 5 years. There's 22 collaborating agencies. We've deployed almost 1,300 transmitters and about the same number of geolocators as of this past spring. Some of the main things we're trying to understand is productivity of Eastern mallards. Are there regional differences? Are they doing better in Canada? If you've sat in on any of these previous presentations, you would have seen kind of our graph showing that mallard numbers in Eastern Canada are actually stable to increasing, whereas in the Northeast US, it's been a steady, slow downtick in our population to where we have quite a bit fewer than we used to have. But overall, the population is still pretty strong. But so trying to understand some of those regional differences. Why are mallards in certain areas doing better than mallards in other areas? How does habitat affect mallard nest and brood success? What can we do as land managers to better support mallards and other waterfowl? So hopefully we'll be able to learn a lot about that. Migration strategies. So mallards are a really interesting one to research when you're talking about movements of migratory birds. They're pretty similar actually to a Canada goose in that you have these residents up to about a third of the population they just don't migrate, especially as you get farther north. Those birds just stay in one spot. And so we can look at how that strategy affects their productivity. Maybe those resident birds are actually the stronghold that are keeping us going, or maybe it's the migratory birds that are doing better. So we're exploring all of those questions about what may be driving that. And there's tons and tons. With this many marked birds, such a broad geographic scope, we'll be looking at things like how migration and high-path avian influenza and the risk to agriculture from these birds' movements, interactions with black ducks, and a whole bunch more, looking at migration timing compared to seasons. So a lot of neat stuff. We're getting real close to start having some final results. So we'll start pumping that out. Actually, I think the first manuscripts are going to start getting put together this winter. So by next year, I should have some really neat results that I can present to the public that I'm really looking forward to. So here's all their movements. Each one of these dots is an individual bird. You can see once we get into November, you'll see big push, and then into December, another big push. Once you get into January, we have very little movement of our birds. They're basically on their wintering grounds once you get to January. So we're going to have some neat stuff looking at migration timing in each state and at different latitudes to show what our GPS data is telling us. And so far, just visually, it seems to really jive with some of that data that we're using for season setting in terms of when ducks migrate, or when mallards specifically migrate. Just to give you an idea of where our mallards are coming from. So, you know, a lot of the mallards in the Atlantic flyway, this is where they are during the summer months. You can see they are by and large staying in the St. Lawrence River Valley, New York, and in these Northeast US Plots states. And then we have quite a few in Canada, out through Ontario, up along the Hudson or the Southern James Bay, and then a smattering of birds, but relatively, proportionally, very few. But some go out into like the Mid-Continent area and Western Great Lakes. But by and large, it's really Southern Ontario, New York, so kind of where we expected them to be. But what's really neat is you can see just how they mix. So these are wintering locations of those same birds, color-coded, and you can see just completely covering the birds from Canada go to the same places that our resident mallards go to by and large. So it's pretty neat to see how they mix on the wintering grounds and then separate out. Some of the other cool stuff that we're doing with this research project on the left there, I know it just looks like a bunch of lines, but each one of these transmitters has what's called a triaxial accelerometer. So it's how your cell phone knows what the orientation of it is, or a video game controller knows the orientation. So you get an XYZ measurement. And what's really neat is that basically every 6 minutes, we get a burst of this data from each transmitter. And from that, we can actually tell if the bird is feeding, if it's flying, if it's preening, if it's resting, and we can do all that without ever going out into the field and seeing that bird, which is a really powerful tool, because in the past what we would have to do is go out, sit on a wetland, look through binoculars, and say what that bird's doing every 10 seconds. You get about a 15-minute window into what that bird's doing. It would fly away and you'd never see it again, and you have no idea how those movements were linked to habitat in different areas, how it was linked to overall productivity of that bird. So super cool stuff. On the right, the other really cool thing we're doing is, I don't know if you can see it, these are the same pictures, and believe it or not, in this bottom picture, there is a duck with a brood. On this top picture, you can see it really clearly. So we're using IR and UAVs to monitor broods throughout the nesting season, and we're looking at brood success, and it's pretty neat stuff. Our birds do tend to be pretty stable in terms of productivity compared to some of the western or mid-continent really ducks that productivity is largely linked to rainfall and things like that. We're trying to find out about those weather and habitat relationships that lead to successful ducks. And so this project is going to help us better do that. So we're getting real close. I know if you've been sitting in on some of these presentations for a while, I've been talking about this project for a while. It takes a long time to collect all the data, but we're going to be able to do a lot of really neat stuff with this, and we are very, very close to finally having those results, and hopefully being able to apply and better guide management of these species, or of this species. So all those partners, if you want to follow along and check out migration, this map is live as of today. It'll stop updating after October 1st is how we have it set up, because obviously during the hunting season, we don't want to be giving folks idea of where these birds are. But you'll be able to look back at previous years in the migration. It's kind of neat to be able to pick out the time you want to look at and see where the birds were at any point in time. So there's also one for black ducks on that same website. All right, lastly, quickly wrap this up with season setting. So, you know, real simple problem here. No, in reality, so what we're trying to do for DEC, our goal for season setting is just to select duck season through a clear, objective, and transparent decision-making process that maximizes duck hunter inclusion and is scientifically defensible and data-driven. So, you know, we wanted to move towards a system that used data rather than pulling in different focus groups and things like that, where the decision ultimately reflects the group that you put together. And we had a lot of folks who dedicated a lot of time and effort, and they definitely did their best, and we appreciate all their years of assistance. But we really wanted to move to something that was more data-driven. So what do duck hunters value? So we wanted to include more people in the decision process, and how we do that is through structured surveys of hunters. So we actually sent this most recent survey out to every single person who registered for HIP that said they hunted ducks in the last year. So this specifically went to duck hunters, not just any hunter, or not just even migratory bird hunters. Like, they had to say that they hunted ducks last year when they filled out their HIP questionnaire. And what we asked them was, of these four things, what's most important to you? So the opportunity to hunt when ducks are most abundant seems like an obvious one that a lot of people would find pretty important. The opportunity to hunt when ducks are migrating. The reason that's important is because migrating ducks are more susceptible. The opportunity to hunt ducks when ducks are concentrated due to ice. Again, those are susceptibility. Those are the difference of, there can be a ton of ducks around, but if one of those two things isn't happening, then, you know, those ducks are likely going to get stale and be really hard to hunt, and people won't be successful. And then lastly, for a lot of people, we know that participation on weekends and to a lesser extent holidays is significantly higher than it is on weekdays. So we want to ask hunters, how important are those holidays? Because it's great if you select dates that there's a ton of ducks around, but if I can't go hunting, then it's doesn't really matter. So we asked duck hunters, and this is what they told us. So we were able to derive weights from that question of how important those things are. So as you would expect, the opportunity to hunt when the most ducks are around was the most important thing to duck hunters. The opportunity to hunt when ducks are migrating was the second most important. And then when icing was likely to concentrate birds was third, followed lastly by the opportunity to hunt holidays. And so all of these were important to some degree, but it varied in terms of how important. And it varied by zone. We did this all based on zone. This is an aggregate of all the state, but when we actually went through the decision process, like in the Western zone, icing and migrating were very close together versus in some other places, there was a bigger split between the two. What species do people prefer? Again, this is on the statewide scale, so I didn't go into each zone, but we considered this on the zone scale when we were making a decision. But across the board, mallards, black ducks, wood ducks, and green-winged teal are the most preferred species. The only exceptions are that on Long Island, black ducks are nearly tied with mallards for the number one, and wood ducks aren't as important as you might expect because there are a few places where you can get access to where wood ducks are on Long Island. But black ducks are obviously ubiquitous with or kind of synonymous with Long Island duck hunters. Then you have a group in the middle that's all kind of medium importance. Hunters definitely care about them, but not surprisingly, it's pretty proportional to what they are in the bag. In the Western zone, redheads are more important than they are in other zones where they don't occur. We winter a large proportion of the population. But in a place like the Southeast zone, redheads aren't going to be important because there's very few places where they actually occur within the zone in any meaningful numbers. Pintails, widgeon, the blue-winged teal are all species kind of in the middle group. And then a little bit surprising to me is just how far down scaup were. Scaup in all zones except for Long Island were, I think, 8th or lower on kind of the preference scale. And bufflehead, goaters, those were all really low importance to hunters when it comes to what should season dates be based on. So when we made that decision, essentially we blended the migration and abundance of all those species into for this graph, just to simplify it, to kind of show you when we weight them based on how important they are. So in this graph, mallards and green-winged teal and wood ducks are getting a disproportionate influence on that graph compared to something like a scaup or a bufflehead. So when you have all that kind of shake out, this kind of gives you an idea of when the ducks that people like to hunt are going through the zone. The green box are the dates we selected. The orange line was using weather data from the past 10 years from multiple weather stations within a zone, kind of when we expect the low temperature, the mean low temperature, to be below 32 for 5 days and to remain there the rest of the season. So obviously in any given year, it may not freeze until December 31st, or it may freeze on October 30th. We can't control weather, unfortunately. But so that's kind of how we came up to a decision for duck season. So we are in year 2 this hunting season of 3. So next year the season dates are already selected. You can find them all at those QR codes that are on the screen. And then we're not going to redo the duck hunter survey in this next iteration. We're going to just redo the migration data. And we'll see where it shakes out. The seasons may very well stay the same after next year, or they may change. But it's just going to be based on updated migration data. And then after that second iteration of it, we'll do another survey just to make sure that hunter values haven't changed in any meaningful way between the two surveys, which typically they don't. Hunter values are pretty stable for things like this, these fundamental things like what species you like to hunt, what's important to you. So, but we will revisit it because we want to make sure that our dates reflect what hunters value in this case. Canada geese, we just went through a very similar process, but had a different slate of questions that we asked hunters about. And that's how we ended up with the goose season dates that are reflected in our season pages. And you can follow that QR code on the top left. And the explanation for each zone is also on our website. So we have a little explanation for each waterfowl zone, or for each Canada goose zone, that kind of lays out why the season dates ended up being what they ended up as. So, and lastly, always check our website before going afield. Despite our best efforts, errors can still happen. If you got the physical printed guide, you'll notice that in the waterfowl section, the bag limits are correct. Unfortunately, in the pullout pages that give you all the season dates for all the different species, there's a 4-page pullout in the middle of the guide. Somehow an old version of the bag limits got included in there. And so there are mistakes for the mallard bag limit and the Brant limit. So always check our website. This year is a perfect example anyways, because of all the changes with crossbow and things like that. There can always be changes after, because this guide is going to print in June, even though the seasons don't start until September. So that's all I have. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll move on to the next presentation. And feel free to please type into the chat box any question, or sorry, the Q&A box, any questions you may have. I'm sure there might be a couple in there already, and if they haven't been answered, I'll try to plug through those quickly here once I'm done presenting. So thanks.
All right, up next, we're going to have Heidi Kennedy give us an update on the wildlife management areas in the western part of the region that she manages. So go ahead and take it, Heidi. Heidi, if you're talking, we can't hear you, and we haven't seen your screen share yet.
I put them to sleep.
All right, Josh, while we're waiting for Heidi, do you want to take on a couple of these questions?
Sure, sounds good. So we have a question from Thomas on what are the harvest numbers historically in September goose seasons compared to the regular season? So we harvest a pretty large number of geese. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but the key components of that are that from banding data and from this telemetry data, we do know that a very tiny fraction of our September season harvest are those migratory birds. So during that September season, we are definitely hitting the right population. It's less than 3% of our band recoveries that occur during September are harvested, our Atlantic population of those migratory geese that we're trying to protect. Now it looks like Heidi's all set, so.
Yes, sorry, I apologize. I had some technical difficulties here. Let me just see if I can turn on my video, and then we should be all set. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you pretty good.
Okay, I may not be able to do the video. For some reason, things are not. Here we go. Okay, there we go. I think we're in good shape now, so apologize for that. Oops, let me just get this to the first slide. So I'm Heidi Kennedy. I'm a wildlife biologist with DEC Region 8 out of the Iroquois sub-office. I'm going to be sharing with you today management updates and waterfowl information for Tonawanda, Oak Orchard, Braddock Bay wildlife management areas. And I'm here with my coworkers, Denise Appleby and William Molansky, who also work out of the Iroquois sub-office. I'm just having, let me just move this. I'm going to start off with Region 8 Summer Canada Goose banding. This was throughout the region. We had 400 new birds banded and 90 recaptures. Banding sites were in Steuben, Orleans, Genesee, Wayne, and Ontario counties. We also have been busy with preseason duck banding. Denise and Bill have been working really hard banding ducks at a private property in Hilton, New York. So far, they've banded 187 ducks, including 73 mallards, 113 wood ducks, and 1 black duck. They've had staff from USDA coming to swab ducks for avian influenza. 100 birds have been swabbed, and so far, they've all been negative for avian influenza. So that's good news. Banding is also being done by Region 8 DEC staff out of the Northern Montezuma and Bath offices. As far as our last year, the opening weekend waterfowl harvest on Tonawanda and Oak Orchard wildlife management areas, as most of you probably know, we issue permits for the two opening days, the opening weekend of duck season. Last year harvest was 369 birds, 31% wood duck. Hold on, I'm having something covering part of my screen. Let me just hold on 1 second. 14% mallards, 47% teal, and 9% other species. Average ducks per hunter was 1.23 for both days, both areas. But if you break that down farther, it was 1.65 ducks per hunter for Tonawanda Saturday, 1.06 for Tonawanda Sunday, 0.71 for Saturday on Oak Orchard, and 0.77 for Sunday on Oak Orchard. 69% were harvested on Saturday and 31% on Sunday. Now I'm having now I'm not advancing my slides. Hold on, I'm sorry. I don't know why my slides aren't advancing. There we go. Okay, just slow. So this weekend, this year, opening weekend of waterfowl is October 11th and 12th. Because of drought conditions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, and also the limited rain in the upcoming forecast, we reduced the number of permits for opening weekend of duck season to 75 on Tonawanda and 40 permits per day for Oak Orchard. We typically issue 100 permits per day for Tonawanda and 40 permits per day for Oak Orchard. After opening weekend, you do not need a permit to hunt on Tonawanda and Oak Orchard. So even if you didn't get one for opening weekend, you can come out after that. If you did get a permit, please remember to return your summary or you will not be eligible for next year's lottery. Even if you don't hunt, you need to just put that on the summary. It's changing slides very slowly. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why it's not changing slides. There we go. Okay. I don't know what's going on here. I really apologize. So some good news is that we have entered, DC Wildlife has entered into a voluntary stewardship agreement with Western New York Delta Waterfowl to install and maintain waterfowl nesting structures on Tonawanda, Oak Orchard, John White, and Braddock Bay wildlife management areas. So far, they've installed 44 mallard structures and 3 new wood duck boxes. They've also replaced 8 mallard structures and 4 wood duck boxes and cleaned out 14 existing wood duck boxes. So that's just getting started. Hopefully they will continue to do more great work next year. And again, my slides are not advancing, so I don't know what is going on. Are other folks seeing the mallard wood duck structure slide on the presentation? Just want to make sure that.
Yep.
Yeah, that one's up, Heidi.
At least we're in sync, but I don't know. I keep pressing and pressing and it takes a long time.
Maybe cut your video. I don't know if that would help with, oh, there it goes.
Okay, yeah, I don't know what's going on. Okay, so as far as conditions on Oak Orchard and Town Wildlife Management areas, we did have a wet spring, but a very dry summer, especially August was super dry, and we've been classified as in a moderate drought since early August. You can see in the map here, the brown area is signifies moderate drought, and the yellow is abnormally dry. But we've been we're right about here, if you can see my cursor. So we've been abnormally or in moderate drought for many weeks now. We did hold on to every bit of water we could in the spring, which has helped. Some of the marshes aren't too bad, but really many of the marshes have very low water levels. Christina and everyone, I'm going to try stopping sharing and then share again because this is really frustrating and I apologize. Okay, maybe it's, okay, now it's working. Wonderful. Okay, so another thing to keep in mind out here is that multiple droughts in recent years have resulted in many marshes having some pretty thick emergent vegetation, and also certain marshes have an abundance of floating vegetation. We really need more rain over the next few weeks to bring the water levels up in marshes and to allow us to start to move water into our drawn down or otherwise low impoundments. The somewhat good news is that when you have a drought, there's lots of moist soil annuals growing everywhere at edges of vegetation. And if we can get rain, some rain and some water into these areas later in the season, that will provide a great food source for waterfowl migrating through. We do have a fair bit of habitat for waterfowl. They don't mind some shallower water levels, and we are starting to see quite a few ducks around. But something to really keep in mind, I say this every year, but scouting ahead of time is really highly recommended because both the duck numbers and habitat conditions in each marsh change from year to year. The water levels, the amount of emergent vegetation, floating vegetation. And so you really want to check out your favorite spots and then have some alternatives in mind depending on the conditions. And keep in mind that boat access this year will be very limited or impossible in most marshes. And also there might be some pretty thick mud, so you have to be careful out there. We did draw down Eastwood Marsh primarily to grow moist soil annuals. And as the drawdown progressed, when we do a slow drawdown, it provides some great habitat for a wide variety of wildlife, including waterfowl, wading birds, and shorebirds. And they make use of this habitat throughout the drawdown. The drawdown did produce abundant moist soil annuals, and with a slow drawdown, you get a variety of different moist soil annuals. So if we can get water on into the marsh, it'll be a great source of carbohydrates for migrating waterfowl. We did aim to have a partial drawdown, which would have made things easier to refill and also would leave, when we got water back in there, some pockets of open water amongst the vegetation. But unfortunately, with the drought, most of the water dried up. Here is an aerial picture taken in late August this year of Eastwood Marsh. The light green is the moist soil annuals. You can see there's a lot of that, but very little water. There's a little bit in the northwest corner right by the control boxes, but really there's not a lot of water yet in there, but lots of moist soil annuals. And this picture here is taken at the north edge of the marsh. You can see the moist soil annuals there. Moving over to Oak Orchard, a lot of you know that we've had a huge water lily issue in Windmill Marsh. It covers a large area with very dense water lily during the growing season. Fortunately, it starts to die off and break down and disappear for migration, so that there is open water there. But it's really become a huge issue, and we've been trying to control it for years. We worked with Ducks Unlimited several years ago to construct a channel to allow us to more easily draw down this portion of the marsh in order to do winter drawdowns, which can control water lily, but it's still been very difficult and control efforts haven't been highly successful. So we tried this year something we've been talking about for a couple of years. We did a chemical drone application on 15 acres of the water lily to test this technique this past August. And we hope to assess and increase the control area in 2026. This shows, the yellow box here shows the approximate area of control that we did this year. And then this is a picture of this really cool looking drone with a tank on it coming in for a landing after an application. Phragmites is another invasive that is a big issue on the areas, and we've been working to control it for quite a few years now. Contractors are in the process of conducting Phragmites control using herbicide at both Oak Orchard and Tonawanda wildlife management areas. This year, we aim to control 43 acres at Oak Orchard and 48 at Tonawanda. And in addition to this, DEC staff from Northern Montezuma is helping us out by coming to treat Phragmites at John White tomorrow. Once Phragmites is controlled at a site, the plan is to restore back to native vegetation. So on Oak Orchard and Tonawanda, there are 33 impoundments, 32 miles of dike, and 72 control boxes. So that's a lot, and it takes a lot of work to maintain and repair these. So I just mentioned that because our operations crews do a lot of work to keep our areas in good shape. Dike repair was done at a variety of problem spots, and a pipe was replaced at a control box on Tonawanda WMA, and more extensive work was done on a dike on the north side of Guthrie Marsh. So future projects I wanted to bring up, cleaning of the main ditch, which runs between the double dikes on Tonawanda, over time is filled in with silts, and in some locations there are large clumps of shrubs and trees growing, and there's also meandering going on, which in a normal stream is a good thing, but when it's cutting into the dike. So it needs to be cleaned out. We engineered plans to restore the ditch to its original design depths and topography, and we have funding. The work was planned to start this late summer, but due to contracting issues, it is postponed and will hopefully be starting in 2026, but it's a big project and probably a multi-year effort. So another project I wanted to mention, first going back a few years, in West Ruddy Marsh, we did a wetland restoration project in the southeast corner, which was completed in the winters of 2021-22. That was through North American Wetlands Conservation Fund grant, and working with Ducks Unlimited, and also in partnership with Finger Lakes and Western New York Waterfowl Association. And this really greatly improved habitat for waterfowl and other wetland wildlife in this corner, because we created channels and potholes within a section of dense cattail. So it really opened it up and provided both better habitat and access. So the good news is we are working with Ducks Unlimited and also Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge we applied for another grant to do additional wetland restoration on the complex. The plan, if we get the funding, and we'll know that early next year, I believe, is to do additional channel and pothole work in the north end of West Ruddy Marsh. The project would also include adding control boxes and fixing an existing dike to improve our ability to reflood and move water east to west to reflood east and west Ruddy Marshes and Paddies 1, 2, and 3. So you get a picture of what I'm talking about. These are drone pictures taken in late August of this year. The picture up at top here shows the channels and potholes that were constructed in West Ruddy Marsh. You can see how they really opened up a dense section of cattail. And then down in this corner, this is from the north looking south, and this dense cattail, which is pretty inaccessible and doesn't provide much habitat for wildlife. The plan is to create channels and potholes in that dense section. We kayaked the channels in the south end this spring, early summer, and they looked really good. These are some pictures of channels and then a pothole. And we did get some comments from waterfowl hunters that they were very productive for duck hunting later in the season last year. Just wanted to show you just a couple drone images here that were taken late August, early September. Cinnamon Marsh is one of the marshes we were able to hold on to as much water as we could in the spring. So there is some, it's not as bad as it has been some drought years. So it's not in too rough shape. South Feeder Marsh isn't looking bad from this drone picture. There is some water in the north end, but the south end is very dry. Whitney Creek is the source of water for Tonawanda Wildlife Management Area, and it's pretty much dried up, and a lot of the southern portion of South Feeder Marsh is dry as well. Clawson Marsh looks pretty good. One thing to keep in mind with Clawson Marsh is that the topography within the marsh is highly variable, so you might have some deep spots, but also some very shallow, very muddy spots. So just be careful out there, but the ducks really like it out there this year. East Ruddy Marsh is one of the ones that's particularly dry. It was drawn down last year to remove, or I'm sorry, to replace a control box. And we didn't get water fully up after the drawdown. So it's pretty dry. You can see there's not the usual pockets of water spread throughout. There's still water in the burrow ditch, but not much other than that. Over to Oak Orchard for a couple pictures. This is Goose Pond. You can see there's a fair bit of open water there. But as with many marshes, there's just mud flats in a lot of the higher parts of all of these marshes. And then Oxbow Marsh, again, some water, but it's going to be a little bit of work to get to the back there to reach that water. And Guthrie's Paddy, or Guthrie Paddy, isn't looking too bad. Now I want to jump over to Braddock Bay to talk about water chestnut, which is a huge problem at Braddock Bay right now. We've been working for, I don't know, over 10 years on controlling water chestnut at Braddock Bay. And this year we spent many days hand pulling in Braddock Bay itself, Buttonwood Creek, the north end of Long Pond, and Buck Pond. We also hired a contractor to do a drone chemical application in the south end of Long Pond, which had gotten to the point it was way beyond hand pulling. It's just a tricky one logistically because it's along the parkway and you can't launch anything other than canoes and kayaks. So we did that, and it looks like it did a really good job, but it's going to be a multi-year effort. We also had Northern Montezuma staff help us out by bringing a mechanical harvester, which we used for a day in the north part of Long Pond. So this rapidly spreading invasive species is starting to pop up in new areas this year. We're really noticing that a lot. And some areas not on the WMA, including the area on Salmon Creek along Route 261 and also Round Pond to the east of the WMA, have become extremely dense with water chestnut. So we've been partnering with the town of Greece, the Genesee Land Trust, and Finger Lakes Prism to really develop a strategy to aggressively control water chestnut in and around the WMA, because we would need grant money to do some of this off the WMA work. The efforts will include a combination of control methods, including more of the chemical drone application, hand pulling, and possibly more mechanical harvester. And we also want to really engage the public to get more help with volunteer hand pulling efforts. If you're interested in helping at Braddock Bay, let me know. We could always use more help, especially if you live in that area. But if you're willing to travel, we're going to have lots of hand pulling opportunities next year if you're interested. Whether or not you want to actually hand pull, we still need your help, everybody, to make sure we're not spreading water chestnut or any other aquatic invasives. So please take care to clean, drain, and dry your boats and equipment so that we're not spreading invasives around, because it can be a real nightmare. Definitely don't want to hear it Oak Orchard, Tonawanda, and Iroquois. So if you see this plant, let us know. Because if it's a few plants, we can easily hand pull it. Once it gets to be really dense, it becomes very tricky. So this is what the rosette looks like. This is a dense patch, what it can look like. And then these are the nasty seeds that the plant produces and then fall into the mud for to sprout in future years. So that's all I have. If anyone has any questions, just type them into the box, and then I'm going to work on getting Paul's presentation up. Hopefully he won't have the same issues that I had. So. Can I bring you up here? What was yours called? There it is, okay.
Yeah, I think we're having Paul Hess with the Iroquois next, correct?
Yes, that's it. I just wanted to get his slides up before he left, and he's gonna walk right into the screen now.
All right, and here's Paul.
Good, thanks. Yeah, I'm just going to give you a real brief update on what's going on with the waterfowl program at Iroquois. I'm Paul Heston, the wildlife biologist here. Been here for 25 years or so, and running the waterfowl program for most of that time. So just a quick update on what's going on at the refuge. So from last year's waterfowl season, these are the results. We had, just for the first split anyway, we had 463 hunters, harvested 1,229 birds for a birds per hunter per day average of 2.65. At the refuge, we only hunt on Saturdays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. So that amounts to 10 hunt days last year. And so, and we also we hunt from stands, markers. For the most part, we have 28 stands where hunters could go. We also had 6 permits that are in our, what we call our free roam area. And those are places where once you're in that area, you can kind of go wherever you want and hunt with anywhere within the marsh. And then we also have 1 accessible blind that's available to folks with disabilities. We also have been open for the second split for the last few years. For a long time, we weren't open on the second split of the season, but last few years we have been open, and it's pretty hit or miss depending on the weather. If we get a pretty good freeze for a few days, most of the birds leave the area and generally don't come back even when if things thaw out. So last year was one of those years where things froze pretty early. We did have a few folks who came out and tried their luck, but for the most part, there wasn't a lot of action. So 25 hunters shot 12 birds during the second split last year on the refuge. Here's just a graph showing the birds per hunter per day totals for each season for the 50 years or so of the waterfowl program at the refuge. So last year, our 2.65 was pretty similar to where we've been the last dozen or so years, but well above the long-term average, which is that red line on there. As far as wetland management goes on the refuge this year, we drew down Mohawk West and Mohawk North to try to get some moist soil annual vegetation to grow, and the water was pretty much held at full pool for Mohawk South, Cayuga, and Oneida pools, and those are the areas where we do waterfowl hunting on the program. We have other wetland management going on the refuge. I mean, we have other wetland management going on in other places, but those are the ones where that will affect our waterfowl hunting program. And like Heidi said, we've had a pretty serious drought this year, and our water levels are kind of showing that. We have a lot of areas where water levels are much lower than where you want them. Most of the pools are probably a good foot below where we would actually prefer to have them. Cayuga and all the Mohawk pools in particular have real low water levels. Oneida pool actually is in pretty good shape because Oak Orchard Creek flows through that one. So we were actually able to get a little bit of water from Oak Orchard Creek. So this year, I was able to move a little bit of water around when I tried to reflood Mohawk West and Mohawk North. So I was able to take a little bit of water from Oneida, but for the most part, everything but Oneida is definitely lower than where it usually is. Just a few pictures of what these pools look like on the ground, where some of the markers are for the hunting program. Stand 2, you can see has some water in it. That's in Cayuga Pool. It's on the west side. It's the lowest part of the marsh. But if you look at stand 7, that's pretty much just mud with a little bit of water that's unhuntable. So, unfortunately in Cayuga right now anyway, stands 1 and 2 are huntable, and the other 5 stands within that pool are actually unhuntable. So there's just too much mud and not enough water. In Mohawk West, again, that's one that we drew down. Started reflooding that in early September. Took some water out of Oneida Pool, and then was able to take some water out of Mohawk South Pool, which is our free roam area. And we also mowed these areas around the markers before we started to flood them, because the vegetation is still pretty robust when we start flooding things in September. So a couple of stands there, that's pretty much indicative of what's going on in that pool for most of the stands. Mohawk Northeast, stands 30 and 32 have the most water in them. So there's a good example of what they look like. It's very similar to Mohawk West. We mowed them before we flooded them, but this pool is a little higher, so it doesn't quite have as much water in it as Mohawk West does. Oneida Pool stands 20 and 27 in these examples. Again, Oneida has a fair amount of water in it, so that one's actually pretty high, pretty much normal for this time of year. So for people who are interested in this and hunting in areas where the water level is generally the same as other years, the Oneida Pool will be the one to go for. And it's just a map of where our stands are, and this is available on our website and also on our Rec Access webpage as well. So if you need any of this stuff, just jump on our website, you can get it. And this is just a free roam area that kind of shows where that is in Mohawk South. So just quick rundown of the highlights. We do have a little bit of a change in our waterfowl program this year. Again, it's a permit system on the refuge. There's you have to have a permit to hunt waterfowl. For the first split, it's going to be similar to other years where we did an online lottery for the first 2 Saturdays. So that's for the 11th and the 18th. And for those 2 days, anybody who got drawn can come to the refuge at 5 a.m. on the day of the hunt. And we'll do a little lottery that morning to pick who, to divvy up stands and see who gets to go where. And then on October 14th, 16th, and 25th, those also will be days where we do the in-person check station lottery. So if you're here by 5 o'clock on those days, you can get in line, get a chip. When we pull out the numbers and we, first person drawn gets the first choice, and so on until we're out of people or out of stands. The difference this year is for 5 of the hunt days during the first split, that's October 21st, 23rd, 28th, 30th, and November 1st. We will not be running the check station those days. We will be doing just an online first come, first serve program through Rec Access. Those 5 days are our least busy days during the first split. So we have some staffing issues this year. And so we pick the days with the least amount of interest, usually from waterfowl hunters, and we put them online on a first come, first serve basis through Rec Access. If you've hunted here in the second split at all the last few years, it's the exact same setup as that. All the stands will sort of pop up on Rec Access at 6 p.m. 2 days before the hunt day, and they'll be up there until they're all selected, until they're all gone. Again, the morning stand draw will be here at the refuge shop on the 5 days that we actually run the check station, and so that's where it's been the last several years as well since COVID. So no change there in the location of where we'll be running the program. As far as the second split goes, there's no change there. It's what we've been doing the last few years. Again, it's first come, first serve on Rec Access. Jump on that webpage, hit the waterfowl information tab, and it'll tell you everything you really need to know about that. Just for information, if you're wondering why you don't get drawn for opening day or the second Saturday very often, it's because we picked 25 names for each of those 2 days, and this year we had 493 applicants for those days. So it's pretty hard to get through, or pretty hard to get drawn. And so that's one of the reasons why very few people tend to get drawn with any kind of regularity. And our youth hunt was September 27th this year, this past Saturday. We only opened for 1 day here on the refuge, and we had 10 youth hunters, and they harvested 23 birds. And that's kind of all I have. So feel free to type questions in the chat. And there's the information if you need it for refuge email address, web pages, and a Rec Access web page. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. While you're there, just one question that's probably on some people's mind with the Congress not passing a budget yet. If the federal government shut down, is that going to impact hunting on the refuge?
It's a good question, and I don't really have a great answer for you. We don't have guidance on that yet. So if the shutdown happens, it'll happen at midnight tomorrow. So, and we will get guidance sometime, probably tomorrow during the day. In past years, it hasn't necessarily always been the same. Some years the refuge is completely closed. Other times the refuge has been open. The trails and the areas are open, and any kind of non-permit hunting has been open. But if there was staff involved, it hasn't been open. So it's really, I don't really know. I mean, we're all watching the news, same as everybody else. We haven't gotten a lot of guidance on this yet. So it's kind of a wait and see, but feel free to reach out to us. There should be somebody here answering the phone potentially, but we'll probably post something on our website or on our Facebook page if and when it happens, and when we have more information.
All right, thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
And now we're going to go to Christina Ho. Give us an update on the Montezuma area.
Gotta unmute myself. Okay. All right. How's my screen look?
Looks good.
Good. Okay. Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Christina Ho. I am the biologist at the Northern Montezuma WMA field office. My team and I manage 5 or 6 properties in Wayne and Seneca counties. And sort of the We're located right at Northern Montezuma WMA, and a lot happens there. So we spend a lot of time there, and that's kind of why we like to focus on what's going on for this presentation. So just an outline, mostly for me. We're going to talk about a little bit of background info, rules and regulations on the WMA very briefly. General wetland management, conditions that we've seen this year. You're going to hear a lot of what Heidi said, and also some specific unit conditions and some access notes, just so folks kind of know what they're getting into. Everybody who wants to come hunt the WMA should do their best to do some scouting of a few different units. But hopefully this will give you an idea of what's going on there. So for any new folks, I'm talking about Northern Montezuma WMA. It's here tucked into the corner of Cayuga, Wayne, and Seneca counties. Most folks probably know Howland Island. It's our biggest unit. There's a lot going on there, but we have a bunch of other smaller units to check out. Some of them are really good for duck hunting. Just to be super clear, I'm not talking about the Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge. They're great. We love working with them. We talk a lot about management, and I think our different access styles really complement each other. But just so we're clear for tonight, I'm going to be just talking about stuff happening at Northern Montezuma WMA. So really quick, some regs. Generally, we are open. So we don't, for waterfowl hunting, we don't do lotteries or check-ins or sign-ups or anything like that. It's very, very free. Sort of the only exception is that there's no hunting around the Montezuma Audubon Center. This is except for participants of special events organized by the MAC, like the youth waterfowl hunt. And if you want to know exactly where those borders are, the area is posted with signs and it's shown on our webpage, our PDF maps. But basically this includes the wetlands that are outside the MAC. So there's no hunting there. We had an issue last year at our youth pheasant hunt where we had a couple duck hunters set up as we were getting ready to bring the youth hunters out, and so we had to fix that before we headed out with the kids. So again, otherwise we don't have restrictions on access, and those statewide and WMA and hunting regs apply. But please, just to note, look out for the no unauthorized vehicle signs on some of our berms, and try not to park so that you're blocking them. You know, we try and not be out and about when it's busy for waterfowl season, you know, going along the berms, but you know, the rangers might be out, and it'd be nice if they can get all the way around and not need to back up a half mile to get off the berm. So one new thing for this property and also Lakeshore Marshes WMA is that, not waterfowl related, but some of you might be interested in both. There is no pheasant hunting or training dogs on pheasants on Tuesdays or Fridays starting this year. So those are our stocking days. And this is just to make stocking a smoother process. This has been the case at some other Region 8 WMAs. Folks seem to be okay with it, but just, be aware of that. I don't know how often, you know, you're coming back from duck hunting or you're going to go jump shoot something and you end up, you know, harvesting a pheasant, but that is not something you want to do on Tuesdays or Fridays starting this year. We're hoping this might also reduce disturbance to birds in some of our units, waterfowl in some of our units. That's not like one of the main reasons this change was made, but it might be a benefit that we'll see for waterfowl out there. So more fun stuff. Some upcoming projects we have. I would love to talk about the Naka wetland enhancement projects that we have planned, but things and timing are, you know, a little bit up in the air with some of these federally funded programs. So I don't, you know, I don't want to say things are happening this coming year when maybe they won't. They're going to happen. It's going to be great. I just don't have a timeline. We're always doing infrastructure improvements, especially our operations crew here, replacing a water control structure pipe. You know, they're always fixing up berms, clearing out beaver debris, just improving how we move water and manage the habitat here. We actually have 2 observation decks that should be built within the next year, maybe even in the next few months. So for your bird viewing outings, not your bird shooting outings, those might be exciting. In the next few years, we're hoping to site and construct a new accessible hunting blind. Folks here might remember the Noga blind that was at Colvin Marsh. That had to be torn down a few years ago just because it was deteriorating and not safe anymore. So I think we're finally going to be able to replace that at a different marsh where it's going to be sighted better. So there actually will be birds there for folks who use it. A big project, not hunting related, unless you want to have a picnic afterwards, is Montezuma Audubon Center. We'll be getting a nice outdoor pavilion, teaching space, picnic area, that kind of thing in the next year. And something to keep an eye out for is the Northern Montezuma WMA Access and Public Use Plan. So that will be released for public comment, hopefully in the next few months. But yeah, there's a lot of things that will be included in it, but some of it is hunting related. It's kind of a snapshot of what we have going on now as far as access and kind of a framework for the things that we want to do in the next, it's either 5 or 10 years, one of those. But yeah, some of that is hunting related, and I'm sure folks who come to Northern Montezuma to hunt come for other reasons too. So yeah, just we'll put that out in probably our Region 8 newsletter, maybe a couple other places. So yeah, just something to look out for that. Yeah, you'll have the opportunity to let us know your feelings. Tell us what looks good, what we missed, things like that. Okay, so moving on to management. A lot of what we do is super similar to what Heidi and Paul do out west. A lot of our time is spent moving water around. We dewater, we rewater, we pump when we can, and we deal with beavers who don't want us to move water. So that is how most of our impounded units work. We do have 3 dedicated moist soil units. So those are Carncross Flats, our Loop Road Flats, and M&M Marsh, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a bit. Those are pretty intensively managed. That involves draining and then mowing, disking every year. Sometimes they're seeded. There's always invasive plant management involved with those. But those are the units that are pretty dedicated to growing duck food. And so if we can manage them right and nature plays along, they can be really, really good units for fattening ducks up when they're migrating and wintering, and also be really good places for hunting. And then a lot of our time is also spent on invasive plant control, again, dealing with the same stuff that Heidi does. A lot of Phragmites, water chestnut, flowering rush, we don't actively manage very much, but we're keeping a very close eye on it, and also keeping an eye out for new arrivals. Again, general conditions, what we've kind of dealt with this year, we had a super wet spring kind of through May. We got so much rain and the Seneca River was so high that we were not able to do drawdowns in a lot of our units. And so we kind of had to throw our plans for the year out the window for the most part. But then that ended up kind of being an okay thing, because if we're not in a drought officially, we're very close to it. We had a hot and dry June and July, and then it's been dry and cool kind of since then. Let's heat it up again. So for most units, water levels are kind of on the low side of average, but they are huntable. And then we are pumping water back into a couple of units. If you've been watching me on this presentation the last couple of years, I've been so excited about getting pumps, and I finally have them. So these are great. Our office finally has them. We're not borrowing them from anybody else. And they let us be a little less conservative when it comes to moving water, because it means that even if the river is low, we can still get water back into our units, to a degree. Some of them are just huge, and a 6-inch pump will only get you so far, but it does give us way more flexibility than we used to have. Just, you know, when we can't cross the river to get to half of our units, we can't move the pump there either. So we're trying. Last year, I also spoke about a wetland enhancement project with New York State Canal Corps. You may have seen the massive excavators out there. So these were 5 project areas that all looked kind of similar to this one here. This is across the berm from Carncross, so between Carncross and Seneca Marsh and the Seneca River. It involved a lot of shallow excavated areas and then these mounds and some channels. So again, the flooding sort of not stopped, but sort of delayed how these would vegetate, but maybe not in a bad way. So the veg has filled into the higher areas, but there's still there was a lot of mud flat, which was kind of nice. And now with a little more water on it, these might be really good loafing areas for birds, but I don't think the lower areas have grown a whole bunch of food yet. Some of these mounds are covered in smartweed. It's super cool, but I'm not sure if the water is going to come up enough or how those seeds are going to drop. So it might be really good, or it might not be. So these, you know, you can't expect even these big projects to look great the first year or even 2 years. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. If you do want to explore them, just be super mindful of the deep mud and the channels that are in these. And then there's also some deeper spots on sort of one side of the mounds. Okay, so moving on to our different units. So this is Howland Island. It's big, it's popular. Folks love to go exploring and kind of hunt. These are different ponds or marshes. So the only way to get to Howland Island by vehicle is down Carncross Road, which will take you to the parking area kind of close to the middle of the island. The Howland Island Road Bridge off of Howland Island Road on the east side, that is closed. That is a DOT bridge. It has been surveyed, evaluated by DOT, and they really don't want people even on foot crossing that bridge. So there's like waist-high angle iron on it now with you know, bridge closed signs. Just, you know, officially, I can't tell anybody to use that footbridge. I would love to see it replaced, even if it was just replaced with a dedicated footbridge. But that, you know, it's owned by a different agency, and it's not going to, you know, hold traffic again. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about it with some folks, but yeah, it's you know, used bridges take forever to be replaced, and so this would be a kind of different animal. But moving on to good things. Howland Island, of course, is great for dabblers. Some management this year, again, we were not able to get out onto the island sort of prime time for when we're supposed to be drawing things down, but Breeder Pond was drawn down. CCC, Gander, and Goose Ponds, those are all kind of in a little matrix together, and those are partially drawn down. And then just Aram Pond, for some reason, was drawn down last year, and it looks particularly nice this year. I'm not trying to send everybody there, but I just want you to know, like, sort of what is going on in that area. And just a note, pedal bikes are allowed on the administrative roads on the island, but e-bikes are technically motorized vehicles, and they are not. So you can bike, you can have a long walk, but yeah, we're not having motorized vehicles past the gates on the island. So just some drone images that we were able to take in the last couple of weeks. Honestly, a lot of the units look very similar to each other. Since we weren't able to really draw most things down, there's a lot of open, relatively shallow water, but there's always nice edges of vegetation where you can kind of poke in and see what's going on. Storage pond is always high. That's what we use to rewater. our units. Breeder is pretty open, moving generally north to south in this presentation. Then you've got brooder pond, headquarters pond, and nursery pond. Headquarters was drawn down last year. It looked amazing. There's still a lot of good stuff going on in there this year, but again, everything looks pretty similar right now. Here's Aram, which looks really nice. There's a few different places that you can access this from, but for this and all of our other units on the island, just be sure you know where the borrow ditch is, if there is one. It's usually on the same side as the water control structure. So just make sure you know where the bottom is. Blue stripe is pretty shallow, but the berm at the south side looks good, and you can see some pockets in there of water that are nice. Coupon, kind of the same story, with a lot more veg right in the middle. Coupon tends to hold a lot of birds, especially on the north side, but I think that is a little bit shallower this year than it usually is. So moving back to the mainland, I'm going to talk about the Morgan Road marshes. So these are sort of the ones that are situated around our office. So Carncross Flats. Carncross is dry right now. It is being mowed and it's going to be tilled soon. Carncross has traditionally been an amazing unit. It is one of those moist soil units, but we've had some issues with invasive plants, and we really seem to be at the tipping point where we think we're going to reset this marsh. So kind of like we did with M&M Marsh, if you saw it, where we had our contract farmer plant soybeans and not harvest them. That worked really well over a couple of years to knock back the Phragmites. And then in Carncross, we have reed canary grass too. So we have a couple really nasty invasive plants that we're trying to manage. And so as long as the permits office does not kick me out completely, and I can get our permits together, we're probably going to be resetting this unit next year, which means we need to do some prep work this year. It will be huntable, maybe not until late first split or sometime in the second. So fingers crossed for better weather, basically, once we're done kind of tearing this up this fall. So moving south a little bit to Seneca Marsh, or Unit 1, very open. That kind of pond on the west side is pretty open too. But there's some nice stuff on the north end. Of course, I had this drone photo from the south end. But yeah, there are some pockets and channels that you can still get into, even though the water is a little bit shallower. And then one of those canal core enhancement project cuts is over there on the right, and you can kind of see how that is filling in. A little bit further south, there is our office. Darner Marsh, formerly Unit 2, looks really nice. Just good interspersion of stuff. You can kind of poke in where you'd like to. And then I'm hoping it doesn't dry up any more than it is right now. Oh yeah, so there are a handful of potholes that are now at least 3 or 4 years old. This was a Ducks Unlimited project a few years ago, and those are starting to fill in really nicely. We're getting muskrat in them. The water's been behaving, and so these are on the east side. Nope, these are on the west side of the river. But then there's another chain of them on the east side of the river on Howland Island that are looking pretty good now and worth checking out. Last one or two for this area. We had wanted to draw a deep muck down. You can see this thing is a lake. So this actually gets a lot of birds, especially the early migrants. They love it. But this is sort of, one where if you're not right around the edge, hidden super well, you might have a tough time. Did I miss anything? Yep. not too bad considering how much we've been panicking over the weather this whole summer. So moving west and then a little bit south, the Crusoe Creek and Railroad Road marshes, those kind of all go in a line heading south from Savannah Spring Lake Road. So Malone Marsh is the one at the top. Malone doesn't seem to change much from year to year. Very open, like the other ones. You can kind of tuck into the sides, but it's pretty open right now. Guys Marsh, kind of the same story. It grew up really tightly with cattails a few years ago, but I think we held the water high and has kind of gotten hammered by muskrat. And so, yeah, there's there's a lot of variety in there. Some of it might require taking a pretty long hike around the berm. But yeah, you can see there's good open water and good space in there. Sort of heading down Crusoe Creek, Torrey Marsh. Boy, there's loads and loads of Phragmites in there. But as far as ducks, not too bad. And then I know some folks like heading over to Crusoe Creek. That's on the left side of this image, and some of those little potholes in there. So those look pretty nice right now too. M&M Marsh, that is one that was in soybean last year, and it held kind of a ridiculous number of birds. I think we lucked out with how the weather and the water behaved right before and during duck season last year here. And honestly, it looks really good. The experiment seems to have worked well. We have put a lot of time into controlling the invasive plants that are still in here, and that's what all of the little tracks going through the drier parts are. So yeah, I'm hoping it'll continue to hold birds. It's growing some really good food. So yeah, we'll be managing that as a moist soil unit, kind of like Carn Cross, but smaller, moving forward. Did I miss anything? Oh yeah, so one thing to note for access is that, of course, there is the railway right south of Railroad Road. And that has disturbed access a little bit at the very end of the road. So that Malone Marsh gate, that's sort of right next to the river cut and the little bridge that goes over. I don't know how much waterfowl hunters like to use that, to be honest. But I'm hoping that the railroad will pause construction this winter, but honestly, I can't guarantee anything. They are working on their property, and the property lines are a little goofy. So just be aware before you go down there that it might be tough or not possible to get, especially a vehicle, all the way to the end. Just a couple more that I wanted to note, mostly because we had the drone photos of them. Our South Butler marshes, so Foster and Warder, looking pretty good. These tend to be kind of set it and forget it marshes. They're cut in a way that until a beaver gets in, like it did this past season, that we can usually predict what's going to happen there. But yeah, there's a lot of space, but they mostly look like they usually do every year. Then I had a couple other that I wanted to mention that I didn't get photos of. So Colvin Marsh across from the Mac, that's that one of those little marshes that used to have the Noga blind on it. That one we were able to draw down this year, and it grew loads of duck food. It's had a lot of teal in it. But I think we're going to be pumping some water into that so that more of it is huntable. The Loop Road unit, that is another moist soil unit. We've been working it up, but that tends to be best like in the second split because it's super dependent on river levels. If you like wood ducks, you're getting out early. Helmer Marsh is sort of our wooded wetland unit. And then Martin's Marsh, which is north of Carn Cross. It's big, it should be beautiful, but it's kind of our problem child. It's fine. Be careful walking the berm if you go there because it's full of muskrat holes. That is another unit that is going to get a lot of work put into it in the next few years, just because we've got so many invasive problems going on there. Teal Pond actually looks pretty darn good right now. But yeah, Martins is a lot. What else do I have for you? Oh, yep. So Heidi mentioned coming out if you were local or available to help with water chestnut pulls up at Braddock Bay. We do something similar. Our friends group helps to organize our marsh program, which is basically a volunteer habitat management, volunteer assistance program. And so we do things like water chestnut pulls. We do native seed collection, which really helps us out for when we're doing restoration projects. Over at the refuge, they pull some other invasive species, and we're going to be doing some buckthorn cut stump. So not everything is like, being deep in the marsh where all the ducks are and sort of helping them directly. But you do get to help the wetlands complex as a whole. Sometimes you get to go to refuge units that are not typically open to the public, which is neat. And it's kind of a nice way to spend a morning and get free lunch. So if you want to, come out, talk to DEC and refuge staff and Audubon staff who have been amazing at organizing this past year. You can scan that QR code and kind of see what's going on the rest of this season. And then I think we typically start up again in like late April, May. We're going to be doing more winter work this year. Because if the weather is good, we can get a lot done for especially some of these nasty woody invasives. So yeah, that's my pitch just for if you'd like to come out and see what we do. You can do that, and we feed you. It's great. So thank you for listening. Feel free to call us, email us. I actually really like it when people come into our office and tell me how they did after they waterfowl hunted on the property. Just because we can't be everywhere, and you all are seeing different things than we are when you're out on the marsh, and so it can help us out too. So yeah, thank you.
All right, I think that's all of the presentations we have for tonight. If people have any questions, we'll give you a little bit of time to enter them into the Q&A. On your screen down in the bottom right corner, there's a little box with a question mark. Click on that, it'll let you type in your questions. While we're giving people that little bit of time, Josh, I think we've got one question that hadn't been answered in the Q&A things, and that is the question about how do harvest numbers compare between the September goose season and the regular season. I don't know if you have that data handy or a rough feel for that.
Yeah, I don't have the exact numbers handy. I tried to explain it a little bit there in between the presentations when Heidi was having those issues. At certain points, our September harvest has gotten really high. It's been pretty stable at a much lower value. I'm just trying to look it up right now rather than guess, because I should have it fairly handy. We used to have a report for September versus the regular season, and unfortunately it looks like all we have now the total season. But it's been pretty stable. I mean, the reality is not much has changed. We still have a lot of September geese, and most of those are resident birds, those birds that aren't migratory, that reproduce at a younger age. So we have very few recoveries of migratory geese during that September season. We know that there are a few that happen to come through. Our data from our telemetry birds, from our banding records show that, once you get past September 16th, the first north wind we get, there are a few migratory geese that trickle in, but it's a relatively short amount of time and a relatively small percentage of the population compared to what's here during the regular season. So. Any other questions from folks?
Not that I've seen pop up. So
All right.
guess you guys must have done such a good job. Nobody has questions. So if they do have questions, they can, when they get this link, I believe we're sending a link to the recording to everybody that registered, and that'll it'll give them direct access to a link for the email where they could email in questions if they do. Do any of the other panelists have anything to add, or?
Thanks for joining, everybody.
All right, thanks everyone. Hope you have a good season.